I want to be absolutely clear about one thing. I applied to the wrong school. It was a Tuesday morning when the acceptance letter arrived, glowing softly on my tablet screen, in the cramped kitchen of my apartment on Earth's orbital station. I had applied to 17 programs that semester: xenobiology fellowships, tactical analysis internships, field research positions. I barely remembered submitting the application to the Galactic Predation Sciences Institute. I had seen the words Advanced Field Survival Curriculum and Interspecies Tactical Study and clicked Submit without reading further. I was 23 years old and desperate for a scholarship. Reading carefully felt optional. It was not optional. I arrived at Vorkai Station on a transport ship carrying 46 other students, and I was the only one without claws. The station itself was enormous, a dark, angular structure that looked less like a school and more like something that had been designed specifically to make visitors feel small. The hallways were wide enough for species I had not yet seen, with ceilings so high that the light barely reached the floor. There were no decorative plants. There were no welcome banners. There was a large sign near the entrance written in 17 languages, and in every language it said the same thing: weakness is information. My assigned dormitory room had no lock on the door. I stood in the hallway for a moment, looking at the empty doorframe where a lock should have been. A passing faculty member, a tall, four-armed being covered in pale gray scales, noticed me standing there and stopped. "Predators do not need locks," she said, in perfect translated standard. "They are the reason other things need locks." She walked away before I could respond. My bunkmate was a Valorn named Seville Dorn. She had 4 arms, 2 sets of eyes arranged in a wide arc around her head, and the particular quality of stillness that belongs to things which are very confident they are the most dangerous creature in any given room. She was cataloging my biological features within 30 seconds of my arrival. I could tell because she kept tilting her head slightly and making a sound like a quiet, disappointed click. "No claws," she said finally. "Correct," I said. "Blunt teeth. Also correct. Your skin has no armor, no natural toxin. Your eyes face forward, which suggests predator heritage, but your body does not match that designation." She paused. "You are slow. I can see it in your muscle proportion. You would not catch anything that did not want to be caught." I set my bag down on my bed and looked at her. "That's a very thorough assessment." "It is a survival assessment," she said. "I perform one on everything I share space with." "And?" She made that clicking sound again. "It is interesting that you are alive at all." That night, lying in the dark with no door to close and no lock to turn, I did what I had always done when I was uncertain and a little frightened. I took out my notebook, paper, handwritten, a habit my grandmother had given me, and I began to write down everything I had observed since landing: the layout of the corridors, the height of the ceilings, the way the Kreth cadets moved, heavy and deliberate, their armored backs catching the light, the way the Valorn, like Seville Dorn, kept themselves slightly apart from crowds, always with a clear line of sight to every exit. I wrote for 2 hours. Then I went to sleep. I failed my first 3 practical examinations so thoroughly that the instructors began documenting my results with what I can only describe as academic fascination. The ambush exercise, where cadets were supposed to stalk and tag a moving target through dense artificial undergrowth, ended with me being tagged 4 times in 11 minutes by a Kreth cadet named Vor, who I genuinely never saw. The dominance assessment, where cadets were supposed to hold a position under physical and psychological pressure, ended when a Dorkai student breathed in my direction, and I took 2 involuntary steps backward. The pack coordination trial, well, the less said about that, the better. But I passed every written examination with perfect marks. My professors noted this. My classmates did not. To them, the written components were formalities, prerequisites designed for species who needed to understand theory before their bodies could execute it properly. For apex predators with millions of years of instinct behind them, the written exams were the easy part. For me, the written exams were the only part. I studied prey psychology with particular obsession. The course was considered a minor elective by most cadets. Understanding how prey thinks was useful, they believed, but not as useful as simply being faster than it. I attended every optional lecture. I stayed late. I borrowed reference texts that nobody else had checked out in years because they were considered too basic, too concerned with the perspective of the thing being hunted rather than the thing doing the hunting. Saval Dorn found me reading one of them at 2 in the morning, a week into the semester. "You study that," she said, looking at the title. It was called The Architecture of Fear, Behavioral Patterns in Non-Predatory Species. "I study everything," I said. "Why that one?" I looked up at her. "Because I am the prey here," I said. It seemed useful. There was a pause. It was the first time I saw Saval Dorn hold perfectly still, in a way that did not seem deliberate. It lasted only a moment. Then she went back to her side of the room, and I went back to my book. The nocturnal navigation exercise happened 3 weeks in. No lights, no technology, no guides. The Kreth used echolocation. The Valorn used their natural psionic sensitivity, which let them feel the shape of living things around them, the way you might feel heat from a fire. The Dorkai used chemical tracking, tasting the air for biological signatures. I used none of those things, because I could do none of those things. I arrived at the exit first. When the instructors reviewed the data, they found that I had not navigated the terrain. I had navigated around the other cadets. I had listened to their movements, the specific sounds of Kreth plates shifting, the particular silence that followed a Valorn when it moved, and I had used them as an involuntary guide system, shadow following at a careful distance, until their path led me to where I needed to go. While they were searching the darkness for the exit, I was following them, reading the pattern of their search, and stepping quietly around them each time they turned. The instructors filed the result under the heading, Anomalous. I filed it in my notebook under the heading, This Works. Weeks passed. I kept failing physical assessments with cheerful consistency. I kept passing everything else. My classmates began to find me odd in ways they could not entirely articulate. When a Kreth cadet tried to demonstrate dominance by standing very close to me and lowering his head, a move that apparently caused most species to step back immediately, I tilted my head slightly and looked at the stress fracture running along his rear dorsal plate. It was a hairline crack, probably from last week's terrain exercise. "You have a fracture in your left plate," I said. "T4 region, if I'm placing it correctly. That must be uncomfortable on turns." He left. I genuinely do not know why. I was trying to be helpful. When a Valorn cadet attempted an unauthorized psionic probe during a group study session, a casual dominance move, the instructors later explained, very common in their culture, she got nothing from me. Not resistance, not a wall, just absence. Human minds, it turned out, were not structured in a way that Valorn psionics could easily read. She described it to her dormitory group later as looking into very deep water. She requested a room transfer the following day. She did not explain her reasoning to the faculty. I began leaving my dormitory door open at night, not unlocked, open. There was nothing to unlock in the first place, of course, but the gesture was noticed. I was the only cadet who slept in a room accessible to the corridor. When a first-year Dorkai cadet asked me about it during breakfast one morning, I told him the truth. I knew where everyone in the dormitory wing was at night, because I had been paying attention for 6 weeks, and I had no concerns. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he finished his meal in silence. Saval Dorn came to my side of the room that night and installed a lock on her door. It was the first lock in the dormitory wing. I watched her do it without comment. When she was finished, she turned and looked at me. "You told Cadet Norval that you track the dormitory at night," she said. "I told him I pay attention," I said. "That's accurate. It is the same thing." "I suppose it is." She looked at me for another moment. The click sound she made was quieter than usual. "Why?" I thought about how to answer that honestly. "Because when I arrived," I said, "I was the least dangerous thing in this building, probably in this sector. The only advantage I have is that I can learn things faster than most people can threaten me." I paused. "So I learned things." She was quiet for a long moment. "Sleep well," she said finally, and went through her locked door. The end of semester survival examination was 72 hours in a simulated wilderness environment the size of a small city. The objective was survival. Neutralizing other cadets was optional but rewarded. Every apex predator in the academy, 230 students across 12 species, placed in a contained environment, together. The faculty described it as the purest possible test of instinct and capability. They ranked me last in projected performance. I thought that was reasonable. For the first 12 hours, I moved slowly and stayed invisible. which was not difficult, because nobody was looking for me. I had a notebook and a compass and 3 days of food, which every other cadet found deeply unnecessary. I had also, over the previous 6 weeks, memorized the facility layouts, the likely resource caches, and the general behavioral patterns of every major species group in the exercise. Not as a strategy exactly. Just because I had been paying attention, I spent hours, 48, quietly watching from a tree line. Below me, a creth pair was moving carefully, and very slowly, in a canyon that had gradually, over the course of 12 hours, become the only reasonable path through their sector. They had not chosen the canyon. The routes around it had simply become, through a series of small disruptions and missing resource caches, less and less viable. They neutralized each other in the canyon at hour 49. I wrote it in my notebook without particular pride. It was just applied prey psychology, in the end. Understanding how something moves when it feels safe versus when it feels crowded. By hour 60, 7 cadets remained. None of them were near me. All of them had stopped moving. This was the part that I had not fully anticipated, though I probably should have. The Valorn remaining in the exercise were getting nothing from their psionic sense where I should have been. The Kreth could not hear me. The Dorkai could detect a biological signature in multiple locations, which made no sense to them, and so they stayed still and waited for clarification that did not come. And because none of the remaining cadets could locate me, and because they were all experienced predators, they concluded, reasonably, that whatever they could not locate was the thing they should be most concerned about. They stopped hunting each other. They started watching the darkness. At hour 71, I walked out of the trees and into the center of the group, sat down on a fallen log, and offered the nearest cadet, a young Valorn named Tev Sol, a piece of dried fruit. She flinched. She had not heard me coming. "You've all stopped moving," I said, "for 6 hours. You've been looking for me." Nobody spoke. "I've been in the tree line on the eastern edge this whole time," I said. "I wasn't hiding. I was watching." There was a long silence. Tev Sol looked at the piece of dried fruit I was still holding out. She did not take it. "What are you?" she asked. I thought about that question for a moment. I thought about the wrong school, and the unlocked door, and the notebook full of observations, and the 6 weeks of watching and learning, and being the slowest, softest, least physically impressive thing in every room. "I'm the person who read the textbook," I said. I won the exercise. Not by eliminating anyone, by making them too uncertain to move. The faculty spent 3 days reviewing the logs before issuing my final grade. Several of them requested extended review time. I was told this was unusual. I graduated from the Galactic Predation Sciences Institute 11 months later. I failed several physical assessments and was granted alternative format accommodations for all of them, which nobody had ever requested before, and which the faculty approved with the specific expression of people who have decided it is simply easier to say yes. I earned the highest score ever recorded in prey psychology. I earned the second highest score ever recorded in target behavior analysis, behind a Valorn graduate from 80 years ago, who, I later learned, had also been technically misclassified on entry. On graduation day, Sival Dorn sent me a message. "You still have my lock combination. I changed it 3 times. You wrote the new codes on my door in pencil before I told you." I wrote back, "I know. Congratulations on finishing second." There is a point to all of this, though I am aware it does not make me sound entirely reasonable. My species spent a very long time being hunted. We were not the fastest thing in our forests. We were not the strongest. We did not have armor or venom or natural weapons that amounted to much. What we had was the particular, specific, almost embarrassing ability to pay attention to things that wanted to eat us until we understood them well enough that they couldn't. We did that for 100,000 years. And then we kept going, because apparently we don't know when to stop. The Academy has updated my species classification since my graduation. I am not listed under Tier 1 Predator. I am not listed under Prey. I am the first entry in a new category that the faculty committee has not yet finished naming, because they keep arguing about what word to use for something that does not hunt, does not threaten, does not display, and does not run. It simply watches until it understands, and after that, it doesn't need to do anything else. The door to my new apartment has a lock on it. I leave it open.